Well, sorry about the lack of content lately. We have a ton of projects going on and just kind of got caught up in so many things going on at once that I ended up not recording. So I'm going to get you guys caught up. This is most likely going to be in the middle of the video that you're watching. So the last video you guys saw, we were doing the cams, buckets, a whole bunch of stuff on the Magnum block, which is right there. Obviously it's a little bit more together now. Forester is still in the same spot over there, but the rally car is gone, which is at Blake's house, like I said earlier in this video, and the silver Hawkeye that was sitting over there is actually done. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a quick update, show you some things, and then we're going to try to get better about posting the content again. Unfortunately, I had 3 builds going on at the same time. We finished the Blue 25 RS and sold it. We finished the racing season. Forester build got even more out of control. We started doing some more stuff and building for power, and then I bought that Hawkeye and I wanted to get that sold and out of the garage too. So the rally car is at Blake's house. It's almost done and we'll be coming back soon. And so this is where we're at with the other updates. The Magnum block is almost assembled. Timing covers are on. What you guys didn't see, unless I got it in video, is that we did a HKS Kevlar timing belt. We're getting into the horsepower range now where we have to deviate a little bit from stock, even though normally we use a stock belt on everything. We also had to put a fluid damper crank pulley on, just to keep with vibrations in the internals as smooth as possible, considering that we can crank up the RPMs now with the cams and springs. Everything's looking good. It's black. I ended up putting 1700 cc injectors in, and I sold my 1300s. So those are in. I hardwired those this time instead of using the plug and play adapters. I do like the plug and play connectors, but we're pretty sure that's why David's motor blew. We think that one of the plug and play connectors came loose and it lost fuel in that cylinder. So to avoid that, I depinned the factory connectors and pinned the ones that come with the injectors. So we also put the Killer Bee Holy headers on. They are Cerakoted. We're using a different material now. See if it works any better than the Cerakote. The Cerakote didn't do too well at holding up with heat on the rally car. It actually melted the wiring harness under the radiators. And then on the Forester, I noticed that it got the plastic pretty hot, even though this one doesn't get driven that much. So, and there's the Killer Bee pan. So just kind of want to get some glamour shots of this stuff, since once it's in the motor, no one will ever see it again, or care really. But this is beautiful stuff. These headers are a work of art. Fitment's fabulous. It's got a V-band up pipe at the wastegate, also on a V-band. It's almost ready to go. Oh, you're not supposed to see this. This is a secret turbo. This is part of the build escalation. So now it's pretty much time to build a fuel system. I also converted the IAG AOS to Street Series because of the extra power. And we got a bunch of goodies from Radium. So we are in gauges. So we're gonna build a fuel system. This is from Radium as well. This is a beautiful piece. Let me set you down. This is an early Subaru dual pump hanger from Radium. And these are 2 450 Walbro pumps. They have the socks inside of them. They're already wired up. And then this comes out to a -8, so a 1/2 inch line. It comes with this factory nipple so that you can use your factory lines if you have smaller pumps, but obviously you can't run 2 450s through that. So I have an adapter to go to a 1/2 inch AN. And we just have to hook up the temp sensor and level sensor from the stock pump and get this wired up. But obviously if we're gonna have 1/2 inch line coming out of the pumper, we gotta run 1/2 inch all the way up, because those little lines are not gonna flow enough fuel for the power. So we got to run our own lines. We're going to do 1/2 inch from the pump all the way up, which also means I had to redo my fuel lines under the engine again, under the intake. But we did take the time and hid the ethanol content sensor, the module, and the fuel pressure sensor. So when the intake's on, the pipe is here, you won't see any of this. So kind of sticking with the sleeper build, but we also detached everything from the intake so that it can come right off. So as you can see under here, we had to switch this T out, so now we will have a 1/2 inch line going in, and then to do a true parallel setup, these lines have to be the same length, so they are, which means I needed a 120, so this would swoop gently along those. So we have 1/2 inch in, and then it splits to -6s, goes through the rail, and then on the return of this one, it actually goes through the content sensor and module and pressure sensor, and then goes out to the regulator, which is on the passenger fender. So these two lines go to the regulator, and then out of the bottom we will run a -6 back to the tank instead of the factory 1/4 inch line, because we will overflow the return line. So this setup's pretty advanced, so we will film some of the install of this. In order to run dual pumpers effectively, this is too much fuel pressure to run at idle, so you end up having to, number one, hardwire each pump. So Radium does sell hardwire kits. We already had one, which we did a while ago, which is this. Really nice connector, thick lines, inline fuse, which also means that when you want to prime the system, you can just pull that fuse out, which is nice. But so you got to have hardwires for each pump, and then you also have to run a Hob switch so that the second pump will only be activated at a certain boost pressure. So we're going to set it, we're going to do some research at 5, 10, and 15 psi, but it seems like around 10 psi is when you want the second pump to come on. So we will show you guys putting that in, and then you also have to run a different fuel filter, since that has a -6 line, so it wouldn't make any sense to have 1/2 inch lines going to that. So we got Radium's inline fuel system. This is actually a -10 filter because it can flow like over 1,000 horsepower. So we have some 8 AN adapters on each side. This thing's gorgeous too, and it has the mounting bracket. So this is actually most likely going to go under the car, so we can clean it up. You can put it here and get a master cylinder brace, but I'm thinking we might still put it under the car. I'm not sure yet. I would like to put the fuel pump relays over there, but we'll see as we build it. I do want to get this done relatively quickly, and the plan was to put it under the car, but the lines will be under there. I got some Vibrant Cells P clips to hold the line in place, so these will self-taper under the car, keep it up out of the way in the frame rail. And then we had to get an oil temperature, oil pressure gauge, and another boost gauge, because my current boost gauge is a cheap Pro Sport one, which has actually been working well, but you might not be able to see it. It only goes up to 30 psi, and we're going to need a little bit more than that. So that's where we're at in the Forester. Kind of detailed the fuel system a little bit. I'm going to get this put back together, and then I will show you guys the Hawkeye when it comes back. It's getting detailed right now, and we'll get some more updates from Blake on the rally car. The rally car has a ton of upgrades going in. It's a little bit overwhelming right now, but it'll be totally worth it. The car is going to be on the next level. Unfortunately, we have a built 2.5 engine for it, but with COVID and everything, it's been delayed, so we might end up having to run the 207 again for one more race until we get that in there. But we did, I forgot to tell you guys this, take apart the 6-speed for the rally car to inspect it and clean it, and luckily we did, because we found that 4th gear synchros were all chewed up. So we took the time and replaced everything. We got a JDM short ratio 5th and 6th gear. We replaced the 4th gear slider assembly and the dogs because they were chewed up, and pressed everything back together with new lock nuts. We also found that it had a bearing that was smoked that goes in the housing where the center diff goes. So this is why the previous owner thought the center diff was bad. These bearings were eating up the housing. I don't think you can see it, but actually it's not over there. It's right here. It was eating up the aluminum on the housing there. But everything's okay on that. I got a new one of these coming in a couple days. I got a new 4th gear shift fork because we noticed that the Teflon had fallen off, and that's no good either. So unfortunately more work than I thought, but this thing will be brand new when it's done. I'll probably film some of the reassembly, and we just cleaned everything out. So this one we know will be 100%. Every gear is perfect. All the dogs are perfect. I put carbon synchros in it. It's good to go. All right, so our next thing will be some clips of getting some more stuff done on these. We do have to make this metal turbo inlet fit that we custom made because the FP one will collapse under a certain amount of horsepower, and we're going for big numbers this time, and FP said that you need to use a hard inlet. So this is a 3-inch inner diameter one to an 84 millimeter. This is a 3-inch tube, and this is an 84 millimeter to 3-inch offset coupler. So this is actually really nice. Rise Fab did it, but takes a little finagling to get to fit in there and some clearancing here. So I'm gonna mess with this a little bit and then we'll get it together. Okay, intake's back off. This is the turbo inlet I was talking about. I had to make some revisions on it for final cut, so I actually had to cut this down about a 1/2 inch, even though I made this configuration the exact same length as the FP inlet, which is right there. This flexes where it goes in between things and around the TGVs here. And this obviously doesn't flex, so it needed to be shorter because it ends up, when it slides into the coupler, it hits here and here. So I had to trim it down so that it just had enough here. Bead rolled it. I had to hammer the shit out of it to get it to fit. So it needs a little recess right there, which is for this TGV slot. And then under here, I had to flatten this side so that when it's in, it rides between there like that with enough clearance. So that doesn't look great, but there's no other way around it except for cutting all this away and welding a flat piece. But even then, the thickness of the aluminum, we might even have to clearance it further. But the good news is, even though I flattened the bottom part of it, the interior flow is really not obstructed. It's just on the back side, and even looking from in there, like, that's not gonna restrict flow much. So this is a 3-inch inlet anyways, and you can make pretty good power on the 2.5-inch inlet, which Subaru comes with factory. So this is still, I've been talking with the guys at FP and sending them pictures, and this will still make over 800 horsepower with this inlet. So the next step is to paint this black. Sleeper build, I don't want this sticking out. I want it to look relatively factory and blend in with the intake. I'm not gonna have it powder coated because honestly it doesn't look great anyways. The welds look awesome, but where I had to hammer it, and I don't want to wait around for it. I want to get this in the car and move on. So I got some self-etching primer. I'm going to scuff this up, self-etch it, and just paint it gloss black. And then I'm also going to paint the front mount because it's not very sleeper having a huge front mount sticking out. Also, why we had to cut the big hole in the bumper. However, if I paint that black and I cover up the fog light covers so you can't see the pipe, then I can put some mesh over this and it'll sort of blend in with the car. If it's black, it won't stand out so much as silver. So I'm going to sand that down and paint it along with the intake, put that back together. Probably won't paint the bracket because you're not going to see that. And that fits nicely and is well done. I think I'm just going to paint the intercooler because you only see like 80% of the intercooler anyways. And then tomorrow when it dries, I'll be able to put the intake back on. Okay, so I've never painted an intercooler before, and the intercooler piping that you will see on the Forester is a Illusion lime green metallic from Prismatic Powders, but the turbo inlet I want to be black, like I said, to measure up with that. So we're painting these black. So I am using, I think I'm doing this the best way possible. So I use 400 grit sandpaper, and actually the waterproof kind. So I scuffed it up and then I went it under the sink and kind of wet sanded it a little bit, 400 grit, and cleaned it off. I blew it off with air lightly, and then I wiped it down with isopropyl alcohol like I do most of my other parts. And then I use the Self-Etching Primer because it's raw metal. This is what I use when we paint with steel, so should work fine for aluminum too. And it dries this kind of army camo green, which is pretty cool. So I just put the first coat on the intercooler and the turbo inlet pipe. It's a little cold right now, so I've got the infrared heater kind of blowing on it. Not ideal, but I don't want to move them around in the house. So I'm going to put another coat on here in a minute, and then I'm going to let these dry fully, and I will probably paint them tomorrow. I got to run to a friend's house who's having issues with his WRX. So far they're looking good though. It's actually, this one's almost dry, the one I started with, just a little bit in the corner there. But it's looking pretty good. I think one more light coat and that'll be it. They were in really good shape anyways. And the intercooler only has like 1,000 miles on it, and those were all break-in miles, so it's pretty much perfect. And that one was all new metal, so I don't think they need very much. Alright, another quick update. Finally got the adapter to go from the, this is where the factory oil pressure switches. All it basically says is when it's out of oil, but you can switch that out. There's a couple companies that make it so that it receives an 1/8 inch NPT for a pressure gauge or switch. So this is the one that I think I showed you guys the other day, the AEM oil pressure one. Even though it looks like it'll thread into the stock one, this is 1/8 inch NPT, and the other one is not a NPT thread, I don't believe. So it doesn't work, so you have to swap that out, get this in there, unplug the oil switch. Now you got your pressure sensor, and this should fit behind the alternator. As you probably noticed, the homemade turbo hard inlet is in, and it's got just enough play that the rubber line should fit over there and the metal one should fit here, so we got some wiggle room. It's all bolted up nicely. I just torqued the intake down to the TGV deletes, and I'm going to make sure everything's hooked up, throw the alternator on here, and probably plug this in just so it's easier to get to, and I'll just droop the wires over. And it's pretty close to being ready to go in. I've already redone the AN lines like I showed you guys previously. So those should be good to go. I gotta throw a connector on this one and cut it shorter when it's in the car. And I was just reconfiguring the system here for the AOS. It initially tells you to cut this piece a little bit short, and this hose wants to sit like right there. So I had to push it in front of it before and then ride on the elbow. But I extended it a little bit so it actually goes over top of the turbo, and then the new version from IAG shows to put heat sleeves over this, which I will order, and that way, even though this will have a turbo blanket on it, this will have a heat sleeve since it's going to go over here where the AOS is. So both of these will probably get it, and then it'll be safe. You got plenty of room for the turbo elbow that comes out for the front mount right there. So it's about ready to go in finally. It's just really waiting on the oil pressure adapter. I didn't want to try to do that in the car. Getting this on there, I wanted to make sure it was nice and sealed properly before putting the alternator and everything. So I'm going to blow it off. This thing's ready to go. I think it's going to work out nicely for us. Yeah, it's about ready. And the intercooler is all painted black, and I just stenciled our logo on it. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. The paper kind of wanted to lift a little bit in some spots. So it's probably not going to be great, but it'll be kind of like a cool little hidden feature, and trying something different. Painted it white to go with the black and white car, and then we put some of this on. This dries clear, as you can see. So I tested it on a piece of aluminum right here. I did a reflective and a glow in the dark, and it actually works pretty good. I think it only lasts for a few hours, but enough for it to be kind of fun. So we'll see how that goes.